I love you too. Yay. All right. Ooh. Hey, look at that. 12 o'clock on the dot. Yay. Hooray, DerbyCon! Come on. My boss is presenting next door. We can do better than that. Hooray, DerbyCon! Thank you. Did you hear that, Jay? My folks are better than yours are. All right, enough fun. All right, so I'd say good morning, but it's now afternoon. It's 1 minute past noon, to be exact. Welcome to I Don't Give One IoTA, introducing the Internet of Things attack methodology. I'm Larry Pesce. You get to listen to me for the next 50 minutes. I'm so sorry. All right, a little bit about me. Who's your daddy? What does he do? Wait, I didn't say that, right? That's okay. I'm Director of Research and Senior Managing Consultant at InGuardians. That means I'm hacker of all the things to the best of my ability. I do a lot of pen testing, management stuff, hardware hacking, radio, you name it. I'm also an author with Synchronous in the past. I do a lot of podcasting, Paul's Security Weekly, for those who maybe have listened once or twice. We've only been doing it, we're going into our 11th year. So I'm also apparently really bad at selfies, and just juxtaposition is important, apparently. So, all right. All right, so I want to give you a little bit of background on what this whole IoT thing is. We probably have a really good idea what it is, so maybe a little bit of preaching to the choir, but I want to make sure that we're sort of all on the same playing field and do a little bit of level set. Okay. So, National Institute of Standards says, quoting one of their documents, but what is the IoT? I love that. What is the IoT? Not what is IoT, it's what is the IoT. Seems kind of weird to me. There are many ways to describe the IoT. More than 20 professional research groups have worked to characterize the IoT. But so far, there's no one universally accepted definition. Okay? I tend to agree a little bit. So, for me, the history of IoT, it's not new. We think, when I think IoT, I think back to when I was in organization and had to deal with embedded devices, printers, alarm systems, all of these sex toys. Well, they weren't in my organization much, okay? But Render, I'm glad you brought all of your sex toys with you, okay? Okay, can we play with the, no, never mind. All right. So cameras, they were all these single-purpose computers that were really difficult to secure. They required patching, and no one had them in their patch management programs. It was a nightmare. This stuff is still around. However, we're lumping more and more into that same category of, quote, embedded devices. And as a result, we've started to have to change that definition. Again, more from NIST. There is no formal, analytic, or even descriptive set of building blocks that govern the operation, trustworthiness, and life cycle of IoT components. Yikes. All right, so I think they decided to fix that. So just recently, NIST released a special publication, 800-183, which defines the various components of IoT. Including a sensor aggregator, communication channel, external utility, and a decision trigger. What is that? That's really descriptive. No. Okay. They're describing IoT at very much a high level and not really distilling it down into a lot of the technical components. They've included some technical portion, but for me, it's not quite there. They've more described how things connect as opposed to, and connect on a very limited scale as opposed to it all. Okay. They actually describe it as a network of things. So they're describing the network as opposed to, the devices themselves. Okay. So with little fanfare, the first Internet of Things model has been published by the National Institute of Standards. Yeah, without fanfare, go figure. How many of you have seen 800-183? I rest my case. Okay, very few. All right, the folks who set the standards for smart grid interoperability in recent years, the new model is an important step in defining exactly what the IoT is, and outlining necessary security standards that go along with it. Could this be the catalyst needed to help drive the emerging IoT market? Market. Not IoT security, market. Interesting. Okay. It certainly doesn't hurt. Yeah, it doesn't hurt. The wonderful thing about standards is that we have so many of them. Okay. All right, so my definition. I'm definitely in agreement with sort of NIST's 5 different components, but as a security professional, they don't go into nearly enough technical detail and describe enough of what I need to potentially start penetration testing or securing any of these type of devices. I think about the more technical components and the items that make up some of these solutions, such as mobile devices, web servers, the actual devices themselves. All of those other pieces described maybe a little bit better for us as a security group, that we understand these devices as opposed to what's a data aggregator and a sensor, and some of those other really obscure terms that they picked up. Okay. So from start to finish, I think a lot of people forget about what makes up an IoT solution. Me, it's not just about the piece of hardware that you hang on your wall that's a thermostat. No, it's a whole series of interconnected devices that make up a massive ecosystem. Think about that for a second. For those of you who got to go see Ed's talk earlier, yesterday, Ed is describing all the components in his steampunk office. And I think Ed mentioned cloud a number of times. He mentioned devices and web services, and it's not just about the device you hang on your wall. There's so many other pieces and parts from a technical perspective that we need to consider. Okay. So what does this market look like? Why do we care about IoT security? This is not a problem that is this is not a benefit that is going to go away anytime soon. I love all of my internet connected stuff. In fact, I want to do more of it. I aspire to have Ed's office. Siri, activate red alert. Yeah. That was awesome. Yeah. We are becoming more and more connected everywhere all the time. I come from a time when the first organization, really serious organization that I went to work for, that if you wanted access to internet and email, you had to fill out a form and request it and provide justification. Yeah, internet was a privilege, not a right. Now, access to the internet everywhere and all the time is a right, not a privilege. And people get really upset when it's slow, like on an airplane. Like, internet on an airplane? That's amazing! I didn't even have to fill out a form. And ultimately, we start thinking about some of the things that these IoT devices have got. They're going to give us ultimate physical control over our environment through some sort of technology. This could be fascinating. But not only are they giving us physical control, think about the price of some of these devices. They're often relatively inexpensive. Why? Because there's so much data that can be aggregated from these devices and shared with other folks to do massive data mining and sharing. So all part of the ecosystem. So what does this market look like? Okay, the Verizon State of the Market from this year, the Internet of Things Verizon State of the Market document from this year said more and more things ranging from remotely programmable home thermostats and wearable health and fitness devices to aircraft jet engines and the nation's power grid will be added to the internet every day. Devices, connectivity, and IT services will make up the majority of the projected 1.3 trillion, with a T, IoT market in 2019. $1.3 trillion in IoT market. Jimmy, start buying stocks now. Yeah. Don't short it. Yeah. Go long. Yeah. This is going to get big, and I see this only going to get bigger in that the devices are going to become easier to use and they're going to become less expensive, and people are starting to adopting them because we're moving into a newer and newer generation that is expecting all of this type of stuff. This is not something that's going to go away. So what happens when we have all this stuff and it all goes wrong? There's tons of value in data collected on the consumer themselves. What are my habits? When do I turn the heat up? How often do I go jogging? What type of food is my refrigerator? What type of messages, text messages do I get to my Apple Watch? The possibilities are limitless. The device manufacturer also can collect all sorts of data, as well as the software developer can capture all sorts of really fun stuff. If we start aggregating this data from multiple sources in an IoT environment, the potential amount for data and directed marketing and big data analytics becomes unbelievably valuable. I think about what happens when my fitness tracker is connected to my refrigerator that can determine what I've taken out of the refrigerator and what's in there and what I need for shopping list, and that shopping list is hosted in a cloud service. It then starts talking to my dating app and can determine the type of people that I like to date. I'm married, so sorry. But, you know, do I prefer people of a specific stature? Where I like to go to eat, what type of foods that I like at those restaurants, the kind of beer that I drink, okay, through something like Untapped. When I leave my house, what temperature I set my house at, where I am in my car based on GPS or my phone, tie it to my bathroom scale. Think about tying all of those things together and building a profile about how Larry acts and the type of foods that I like to eat and how much exercise I get and what my mental state may be looking like by looking at potentially my relationship status and so forth. That also makes for great marketing, okay, direct marketing. But what happens if that now gets all aggregated to my healthcare provider? They can now make some decisions about how much they're going to charge me for my health insurance. Potentially can make some deductions about, you know, my possible health and potential outcomes for some diseases and so forth. That actually becomes really frightening to me. But what happens when it really goes wrong? Okay. So Eden Cohen, or co-author of Idiocracy, actually stated that he never thought that this movie would become a documentary. If you guys haven't seen this film, it is billed as a comedy. Okay, go watch it. It's not a good movie. It's a fantastic movie. It is very much a documentary, and the authors may in fact have been a little bit forward-seeing. Yeah. Anybody go to Starbucks this morning? Did you get a latte? Okay, we don't have time for that right now. Do you guys like money? Yeah, I like money. I'm really glad to see we're hanging out. Okay, yeah, absolutely. All right, but if this stuff is so successful, like parasites, like our hundreds of millions of IoT devices in our environment, why haven't parasites taken over the world? It's simple. They have. You just don't know it. Okay? That's because the successful parasites don't kill us. They become part of us, making us perform all of the work to keep them alive and reproduce. Okay? How many of you have listened to or read Damon by Daniel Suarez? If you haven't, go do it. Yeah, awesome book. Daniel's got a ton of awesome titles. Essentially, to roll up the history of Damon, gentleman is very wealthy, and he does a bunch of data aggregation through some of his wealth, through 3D printing, one-off manufacturing, and so forth. He essentially creates a world of internet-controlled IoT that is managed by AI, and not in a good way. Like motorcycles with machine guns without rider that are controlled by AI and can shoot whatever the heck they darn well please. That sounds like a future I don't want to be a part of. Okay, maybe one of those in Ed's office when red alert goes off. Yeah, well, Ed in control of it, I trust. I probably shouldn't. But what about when we put the computer in control? Yeah, that's an interesting challenge. All right. Let that sink in for a second. Okay. The hardest part about the impending IoT apocalypse is that pretending I'm not excited, because this is going to go awesome for us as security professionals, unless we make it better. So let's talk a little bit about this whole ecosystem, this whole mess that is IoT, the way I see it. Okay, so it starts with a device that does something, okay? And then it connects to a network, and then you got a mobile app to interact with this thing, and there's a hosted service with a web app so that you can do this in the cloud and you can manage your device from somewhere, from a computer as opposed to a mobile app, and you can have multiple devices tied to the same account. And then they capture all sorts of data, and then they aggregate that in a database for their own service, and then they start sharing that data with other third parties so that we can do larger data aggregation. It's happening. Okay. So it starts with one thing. Aw, cute, a little panda. You guys seen these things? This is the smart toy. Okay. Yeah, one of our analysts actually has one of these, and we're having some fun with this. He's dubbed it Operation Sad Panda. They make multiple versions of this bear. One's called a monkey. One's a monkey. I have a monkey. That's not the same monkey. Your monkey is not internet connected. Mine is. The project is called Operation Spank the Monkey. Yes. Yeah, well, it's true. RenderMan here has the Internet of Dong.gs. DON.gs, Internet of Dongs. Yeah. Wait, what happens when your sex toy talks to your dating profiles? A lot of fun? All right, so we've got this one thing. This is our IoT device, right? This does not act standalone. Then it wouldn't be an internet or network of things, would it? No, we've got devices that it connects to. We've got our mobile app and our wireless network and the internet and the cloud and some big data aggregation services. So it turns now into this ecosystem of many things. But we have more than just this one panda in our house, right? We have many things, many, many things. We've got our thermostats and this other toy, a doll, and light bulbs, right, Ed? Yep. And our car chargers and our internet-connected automobiles and tire pressure sensors and our online banking and our smart grid and our health fitness devices, potentially medical devices, and they're all connected to the internet cloud and these back-end data services. And then what does it look like? Yeah, all this stuff talks together. This is a freaking mess. And these services all talk to each other. How? Well, we have no idea because somebody needs to look at this stuff. And I actually think going through this and I'm like trying to connect all these dots, and I think I probably forgot a couple dozen interconnections here. Like, this is a mess. Okay. To me, this is why testing Internet of Things ecosystem, not the device, the entirety of the ecosystem is super important and more important than ever. This is really weird for me. You know why? Most of the other talks that I've ever given at a security conference have been technical in nature. This is me pretending to be a thought leader. Okay. How am I doing? Wait. My boss is next door. How am I doing at the thought leader? You guys rock. Free beer at the bar. Yeah, free beer at the bar. It's on Ed. All right. So how do we test this stuff? Well, I spent some time thinking, and we really need some methodology to make this happen. We spent some time at InGuardians years ago, not all that long ago, building a testing methodology for Smart Grid. Let's leverage that experience and build a testing methodology for the IoT ecosystem. Cool. Oh, good. I'm doing good on time. All right. So I want to introduce to you folks IoTA. This is the Internet of Things attack methodology. Yeah, I dropped the M because what's an IoTum? Yeah, I know what an IoTA is. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the IoTA, some of the methodology components, some ways we can do some implementation, and give you some ideas about how you can build a lab. We're not going to go into every single component. We're going to give you some high-level ideas because this is actually pretty darn massive and huge and overwhelming. All right. So I see, based on sort of the 5 NIST areas, I see 5 areas for technology that we really need to evaluate in an IoT ecosystem. We've got our hardware, comprising of some firmware running on the device, some radio communications in all its states, proprietary or otherwise, some Wi-Fi, Bluetooth low energy. How does this device communicate, and what does it do? We have some potential web app stuff for interaction with the device. We've got some mobile apps. We've got traditional network type of environments to deal with because we're building networks to support all of that IoT stuff, servers, web servers, routers, you name it, as well as all of the corporate systems that are potentially interacting with all of that data stuff from accounting, finance, HR, all subject to phishing. And then what do they do when they start interacting with those services? So think about it from not necessarily the operational side of the house, the IoT side, but the IT side of the house. So if there's a company that offers an IoT device for sale, they have business services. Attack those business services too, because oftentimes they are going to be interconnected at some point. Okay. And finally, API testing. What happens when they're open and they offer API testing? A number of years ago, I did some testing on some smart thermostats as part of my talk at DEF CON. And in fact, the API that they had, the initial version of the API, allowed you to query the device over unauthenticated HTTP and obtain wireless SSIDs and passwords. Okay. If someone hadn't tested that, they would have never updated it, and that's a problem. So we've got to test the API as well. Okay, so looking at the hardware side, this is interaction with the device. Go buy one and take it apart with some tools. Or hacksaw, or thermite. You know, thermite's probably not going to leave you with too much left, but you get the idea. You got to go take it apart. Okay. Start investigating the board. We now need some tools to start interacting with these devices from the hardware level and seeing what hardware protocols are available, whether it be RS-232 or TTL serial, JTAG, I2C, SPI. Look at the data buses on the device. What is transferred over those data buses? Okay. Bunch of tools for us to potentially look at some of that type of stuff, an oscilloscope, total phase aardvark, Cilia logic, various serial adapters, bus pirate, so forth and so on. Okay. We also potentially need to start looking at some of the radio components with some Wi-Fi adapters, software-defined radio, Bluetooth dongles. The internet is our friend. Tear the stuff apart, look at the chips, and then go look those chips up, get product data sheets, and then start figuring out what the capabilities are and or what methodologies they're using on board to do transfer. Okay. Go buy cheap stuff off of something like Deal Extreme. Have you guys ever shopped at Deal Extreme? All right, you guys are my people. Be careful with Deal Extreme. You go there, cheap stuff from China, sometimes here in the US, like a 7-inch Android tablet, $22. Yeah, this is cheap stuff coming from China. What if it doesn't work when it gets here? It's only $22, buy 6. You see my problem. And then as you're shopping for this, it's like, oh, hey, cool, I can use one of those internet-connected doorbells that's $4. What if it doesn't work? It's $4, buy 10, yeah. Do you know how many tablets I have at home? Like 22 tablets. How many doorbells? Way too many. So next thing you know, you're checking out and your bill is $300 and you needed 1 tablet. And you got 6 and be careful. But buy cheap stuff from China to practice on. Don't buy the really expensive stuff because you're going to destroy it. Practice in your lab on cheap stuff. All right. Firmware analysis, there's a couple of ways we may need to obtain this. We can pull it from the device itself, pull it from the services that are offering these updates for download. Maybe we even need to observe an update for the device and sniff the traffic on a span port and recover this data from network captures. Okay. Start doing some extraction, mounting of the firmware, and then do some analysis of these as well. We're talking software in this case. Specifically, if we're able to obtain the firmware from some sort of software download. Unix strings is your friend, binwalk as well. Start mounting these and looking at the operating system themselves. Okay. On board analysis, JTAG is also a great way for recovering some of the firmware and memory from these devices. Potentially, we're looking in this content for passwords that are used with other services, static passwords stored in memory for various services. Device configuration. How are the chips configured? How are services on this device that are running configured? Best to have physical access to some of the stuff because then we can start examining it. Do file system forensics, memory forensics, find out what's there. Interact with buses such as SPI and I2C and even serial for observing interchip communications on boot up time. Because in many cases we see the processor sending commands to the radio every time of boot up, and now you know how the radio is configured, so you can use that stuff in additional analysis portions when you start doing proprietary radio analysis. Okay. Some other radio fun stuff. Software-defined radio has exploded in recent years. Awesome stuff. Take some of our software-defined radio, do the RTL SDR for receive only on the cheap. The HackRF, the BladeRF, and the upcoming Lime SDR, relatively inexpensive with some free open source software. Consider the Yardstick 1, the CC1111, Don's dongle, or in fact the Yardstick 1, which is very similar. The problem that we end up with some of these proprietary protocols is they're often non-complex, but take a lot of work to recover. And unless this is something you're doing every day, it's potentially time-consuming and frustrating. There's tons of other standards for us to look at in purpose-built devices. The Nordic Shockburst stuff, which is the recent keyboard stuff that Bastille Research has released to recover keyboard and mouse strokes. Z-Wave, Zigbee, wireless HART, depending on your environment. LoRa. How many of you guys have seen LoRa stuff already? I had never heard of LoRa until about a month ago. Like, this is new. This should be something that we start looking at more. Thinking critically about some of these things that happen on these networks. What happens when we capture traffic, and what happens if we replay it without modification? Can we modify traffic? What happens when we modify the traffic? Change source destination addresses. Okay, it's not just turn Ed's stuff off. Turn Ed's neighbor's stuff off. Yeah. Okay. Some Wi-Fi stuff. Some different ways that we can deal with this. Not only should we attack the devices with Wi-Fi to the device, but stand up our own network to connect them to. If we can do open wireless network, we can start inspecting traffic. Or we can do that upstream Ethernet. Do what you need to do to make that happen so we can inspect Wi-Fi traffic coming from the device. Examine the traffic during all of our different times, during boot, during normal use, when it's not in use. So if you're interacting with a device, what happens when you're interacting with the device? What happens when it's sitting idle? Does it do periodic check-ins? What does the device do when you attack it or modify hardware? Yes, you'll be doing hardware hacking with the power turned on. Yeah. There's potentially lots of traffic for us to analyze. It's going to be challenging. In many cases, the Wi-Fi stuff in itself is not going to be terribly useful. Otherwise, so the Wi-Fi itself, 802.11 standard, as opposed to other network traffic, 802.2, 802.3, HTTP, you name it. The wireless portion is going to be fairly limited for its analysis because in many cases, these devices are put in a consumer's home where the consumer defines the network, unless the network is defined by the manufacturer. And there will be those cases that will happen, and then analysis of Wi-Fi itself is important. Bluetooth is hard. Bluetooth low energy is frightening. because they simplified the stack massively. It's also loads of fun. Consider Ubertooth 1 or a standard Bluetooth low energy dongle of some variety. Most of the new ones now are supporting Bluetooth low energy. This one happens to be the Pirani SATA UD100. In the newest version, it supports Bluetooth 4, Bluetooth low energy at max power. Yeah, awesome stuff. Okay, use some of our various tools. Do some listening, potentially do some playback with something like BLE Suite and BLE Replay. Interact with the public services that don't require authentication. Read values, write values. This gets fun real fast. Okay. Discover them, connect to them. It's possible when pairing is involved that we can do pin recovery with Crackle. Do all sorts of fun stuff with Bluetooth low energy. If you had to pick a wireless technology that was easy to interact with and have some fun with and controls all sorts of stuff, this is where I'd go first. Okay. Build yourself a web application testing lab. I'm sure many of you do this now. Consider some of the open source projects such as Matilda, however you want to pronounce it, Hack Me Bank, so forth. There are tons of web application test frameworks that you can use to practice your skills. Stand those up. Use Burp, Zed, Charles Proxy, take your pick. There's tons of tools out there for web application scanning and testing. Some of my favorites listed there, Derby, WP Scan, and SQL Map. There's a myriad of tools, and in fact, you can write your own. Some other ways to practice, go look at bug bounty programs. They give you permission to hack their stuff with certain scopes. Live targets. This is what you're going to be testing in the real world anyways, isn't it? Yeah. Not just Hack Me Bank, because that's easy. Pick something harder. Okay. In practice, web applications are a disaster. We know this. Cross-site scripting, SQL injection, the list goes on. Session token expiration and modification, token entropy calculations, sequential sessions, what happens when we modify all of this stuff? Can we access items within their web pages with unauthenticated access that gives us the ability to perform commands? What happens we try to escalate our privileges and become the admin user? Field length checking, cross-site scripting, the list goes on. Fun stuff. How about some mobile app lab stuff? It's time to buy a device. How many of you guys have tried to do mobile app testing on iOS in a virtual? Yeah, render's like, no, heck with that. You got to go buy a real device and jailbreak it. I like using real Android hardware for doing this as well, because there's nothing better than real hardware. Deal Extreme for the win, right? 10 Android tablets. And sure, you're going to get Android tablets from Deal Extreme, and they've got KitKat on it, or an older version of Android. Guess what? So do the users. Okay? These manufacturers of the mobile apps for these IoT devices have to be backwards compatible for some of these operating systems. Who cares if it's not the latest and greatest? Because this is going to be the user-supported base. Okay? Start picking some app, have some fun, take your choice. But if you find stuff, disclose it responsibly. I mean, you don't have to. I implore to you, please do. You know, let's be good human beings. It's about making this better. In practice, take a look at our traffic, hammer nails through it. This is a Samsung device. It's probably not a good idea. Okay. What happens when we respond faster to requests with malformed packets? How do the apps react? We are now able to observe traffic. We can now potentially interact with the web apps directly outside of the application. We may be able to capture credentials, which would be useful later when doing API interaction. Start looking at what the app looks like on disk. What is it storing on disk for credentials or other interesting information? Hidden Boolean values that change the operation of the app itself. Is developer, is not developer? Yes, we've seen that. Okay. What's in the configs? What's on disk? What's in memory? Okay. all sorts of fun stuff. Network penetration testing lab. Yes, this pen works, I think. Okay. We can spend days talking about network penetration testing. No, we're not going to. I'm standing between you guys and lunch, right? Or ham radio testing at 1 o'clock downstairs. Okay. We've got all sorts of different networks to test, all of them in various scenarios, but in many cases very similar. You know, we're turning the perspective 90 degrees as to where we have access and what we need to interact with. Okay. We've got different scenarios. Is an insider threat? Is something that we're going to assume compromise on an internal network? Assumed compromise on an IoT device. You're putting these in the hands of millions of hackers, right, as users. Assume a compromised IoT device. What happens there? Build a lab. ESX for the win. MSDN licenses for the win. Build a lab. Virtualize it where you can. If you need real hardware, consider something small, low power draw, Raspberry Pi, Odroid, BeagleBones, those types of things. I love Raspberry Pis, as Ed proved in his talk at 8, and I lost count at 15, and I showed you a picture afterwards, and there were 12 sitting in the box on my desk, and those are the ones that are not in production. Production, right? It's really weird to say that about your home network. Production network at home. This is an IoT network. It's in production. Yeah, because what happens when you take it down? Your IoT stuff stops working. Okay. Consider taking a look at some of the ways they do CCIE lab building and testing. Build one of those labs too, so you can play with network protocols and network devices. External testing can be all sorts of fun. Okay. Consider seeing what's available for some of these services with open source intelligence. Do some scanning and event enumeration with permission, of course. Okay. Then we start moving that into an internal. What if our external is successful and we're in? Tank them in. What's next? Well, we turn an external pen test to an internal one. And then we go down that rabbit hole. And then we also need to consider what we're going to use for exploitation and command and control. Consider using test environments in something like AWS to do external testing, stand up your own services actually across the internet and notify AWS that you're going to be testing them, because they like that. Okay. In practice, yeah, this is our days and days and days of network pen testing. So what? Recon first, figure out what's available, okay? Do some scanning, do some enumeration and analysis of what you find, do some exploitation. Once you're on the system, pillage the village for what's available, pivot to other networks, lather, rinse, repeat. Okay? Scan, analyze multiple times as we go through. API testing is hard. Why? We won't know what the API implementation will look like. We will only be able to build simulations in a lab. We have no idea how each one of these manufacturers is building their own API. We can get some ideas about the technologies they may use, but the actual implementation will be different. So pick something and play with it to build practice. Casey, I'm going to put the microphone down so you can actually get a picture without something in front of my face like this. Ready? Yes, I'm a whore. All right. See, I know these things. I'm not bashful about it, right? All right. All right. We're going to need to find some programming languages potentially to do some interaction with these APIs. Pick one. I don't care which one. My intern programs in Haskell. Go for it. I looked at him when he said Haskell. I'm like, ew, Haskell. And then he wrote kick-ass stuff. I said, Haskell. All right, go for it. All right, consider use of web app proxies as well. Interact with the API through a browser manually or scripted, and then intercept all of that as well. It's very similar in many cases to web app testing. Okay. What are we dealing with for languages for API testing? You know, straight XML, SOAP, JSON, RESTful APIs, WSDLs, yeah, they're still there. Binary HTTP, their own custom implementation. Yuck. Now go implement this in your lab and try to play with all of these. Every one of these from an IoT device is going to introduce their own individual challenges. We're not going to be able to test every one in a lab, but we're going to get close and get practice for where we may see issues with other implementations. Go and deploy something in your testing environment that uses one of these API methodologies from, say, an open source project and test it. Build your skills with some of these tools, and then find libraries to interact with these API services in your language of choice and start scripting the heck out of it. Okay? I never wanted to be a programmer. I didn't want to sit in front of a box and code all day. So I specifically chose not to do programming. That was a mistake. Because what am I doing now? I'm learning programming languages. Go to No Starch Press's booth and pick up No Starch for Kids, or program for Python for Kids. That is the book that I am teaching myself Python with. Seriously. Why? Because when my 8-year-old wants to start programming in Python in her Minecraft server that I have set up for her, have I got a book for you? And Daddy's already read it. Okay? Yeah, I love that book. I'm using a kid's book written for an 8-year-old to learn Python. It's perfect mindset for me. My wife says I'm a 10-year-old trapped in a 40-year-old's body. She's right. Fart jokes are funny. Okay. All right, I'm a little early. 9 minutes or so, 10 minutes or so. But I really want you guys to think about, this is a massive undertaking, isn't it? Like, whoa. Yeah. Like, think about all of these things in the ecosystem that we've just talked about, and if you're going to test this entire ecosystem, the volume of lab that we need to build, and the practice, I get why this is hard. This is encompassing. Lots of skills are needed. Okay? We're going to need to develop our skills. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as asking Tank for instructions on how to fly a military M109 helicopter. If we build IoT devices better, maybe we can make this happen. I wouldn't want to do it in the state of security IoT right now because render will screw with my brain. Okay? Yeah. If you do that, you're right. You're right. All right. So, full scope IoT ecosystem penetration testing encompasses many disciplines and requires volumes of knowledge. This is not something that we're going to fix overnight. He sucks. He also finished early. I've heard that about him. Well, there goes my raise for the year. Okay. All right. So you guys remember the scene in The Matrix when they go to rescue Morpheus and they go through the metal detector and the metal detector beeps and Neo opens his jacket and he's loaded down with weapons and the guard goes, "Holy shit." Yes. You need to do that. Don't go on your adventure alone. Don't go rescue Morpheus alone. Build a team to do this. Why? Because if I think about this from what we do, I am not an expert in every one of those 5 scenarios, but I have people that are, and I work with fantastic folks, and I have a community that are awesome at these things too. I can't do it all. I just can't. I'd like to think I'm that smart. No. We need a team. These 2 kicked ass, and they got Morpheus back. And allegedly, they made things better. Okay. Together, we can help build a better ecosystem. And if we're not building it, we can affect how other people build their networks by testing it appropriately and helping them fix the issues so that render can't control my brain, or my panda, or my sex toys. Okay? or abuse the data that is collected by all of those together. Wait a minute. If you're collecting data about my panda and my sex toys at the same time, we've got a problem. Okay. Let's build it better. Let's help other folks build it better. So let's start considering some methodology for making this happen. So where do we get this methodology? Turns out I bit off more than I could chew. Yeah, what I thought would be a 30-page document is running somewhere around 130 pages. Yeah. There's not enough hours in the day for me to complete it. It's almost there. I didn't make it for DerbyCon, I'm sorry. So sad. I know I suck. But we're almost there. We know what the components are going to look like. We know we have the bulleted list of all the things that we want to talk about. It's now taking that bulleted list and making it cohesive so someone can use it and not just be a bulleted list and make it robust. Okay. We're going to have that available. There is a page here describing what IoTA is at inguardians.com/IoTA. It's going to be soon. I don't know the date. I'm managing workloads and family and children, and just started actually making sure I'm taking care of my health by like going to karate 6 times a week or some ridiculous stuff like that. Yeah, I got my ass handed to me by an 8-year-old girl. She happens to be my daughter, but that's gonna change. Okay, so yeah, let's please be patient. It'll be here. We talked about some stuff. You guys can start drawing the dots, but we want to make it available and usable for someone that may not have all the pieces that we do, and give us the ability to help select teams and build those teams. It'll be here, I promise. So have you guys ever heard of the theory about when you make a commitment to someone by speaking it aloud, that now you kind of have to commit to that? Okay. I have just done that to all of you. That is my promise. It will be soon. What soon is, I don't know. But I've made the commitment to make this available and have it complete for all of you. And I'd love to have some feedback on the presentation. Is there something I forgot? Is there something Larry, you're crazy. Get rid of that API stuff. If you want to help, that'd be awesome. You don't have to. You wanted to get the word out? Great. I appreciate all of the feedback and any offers of help, assistance, criticism, constructive or otherwise. I'm a man, I can take it. No worries. You want to call me a jerk? Great, call me a jerk. Thanks. You guys rock. Say that one more time. You can't do it, can you? Come on. You guys rock. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your DerbyCon to family.